Howdy, Rex here. I'm back. So before we get started on getting into depth in these reloading videos, you're going to have to probably know what kind of equipment you're going to need to do reloading. So let's introduce you to some basic reloading equipment that you are going to need before you get started. Okay, let's hit the button here and pull this baby off. First thing obviously you're going to need, you want to do your cartridge reloading, is some empty cartridges. So once you build up a good supply of these, a couple hundred or so, you should be ready to rock and roll. That's the first thing. Second thing you're going to need, a set of reloading dies. Many different makes and models. RCBS is probably one of the most common. Lee dies are very good. There's lots of different kinds of dies you can get. They're all basically pretty good. This is a neck die set, which means this is made for kind of target shooting, neck sizing. It has a different sizing die. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail later. But basically, if you're going to do a lot of target shooting, and you're trying to get the most accuracy possible, and you don't necessarily have to have an extremely reliably feeding rifle, the neck sizing dies are really good because all they size on the case is the neck area. So when you're resizing, all the rest of this stays fire formed to the chamber, which ensures for a tight fit. So that'll give you good accuracy. However, the drawback to these are that these cartridges are going to have a lot more tight of a fit in your chamber. So that could reduce your potential reliability in the field. You get any kind of grime in there or something else happening, and you could get a little more propensity to get stuck. So if you're hunting, using this for serious hunting applications, maybe varmint hunters wouldn't mind using neck sizing dies. But if you're big game hunting where you've invested a lot of energy in climbing a mountain and finding elk, I would recommend full length sizing dies. Now even if you do get a set of neck sizing dies, this is for my .338, this is my target loads that I use. I would strongly recommend also getting a set of full-length sizing dies as well, because there will be times when you're going to want to just do full-length resizing after a certain point. So that's one necessary thing. Get yourself a set of loading dies. Also, you're going to need a shell holder. That's this little clip-in deal here, and that's going to obviously hold your shell, like so. Now, if you're going to be using one of the RCBS priming tools, I would recommend buying an extra one so that you don't have to take it in and out of there all the time, keep taking it apart. So maybe two of them if you plan on using the RCBS hand priming tool. If you're using the Lee hand priming tool, then one of these things should be fine, and they're just a couple bucks. Okay, and you're going to want to get this for your particular cartridge, obviously. So you're going to have to look on the size chart and see which one will fit your cartridge. The next thing you're going to need is a loading press. Here you see a single stage loading press. This is one of the cheap Lee presses that you can get. I think I have a Challenger. I forget what the name of this one is. It was like $20-some. I actually got this one as a gift from my father-in-law for free. And you don't need to spend a lot of money on a press to get started. I've been reloading since I was a little kid with my dad. And we always had the cheapest equipment possible. The nicer things, if you do upgrade presses, if you want to go for like an RCBS rock chuck or something, those are built a lot nicer than these, that's for sure. They're a lot more solid, you'll have better leverage, you'll have less mechanical problems due to the heavy-duty construction. These do run into some problems, and I can do a review on the separate piece of equipment separately. But just as a general rule, any press will work fine. A single-stage press is actually a really good choice for precision rifle reloading. A lot of guys feel like they need to maybe get one of the rotary presses or one of the high-speed type progressive setups, and those work great for pistol shells or for standard rifle shells where you want to reload large volumes of cartridges in a short amount of time. However, for our purposes, we're going to take a lot of care and go very, very slowly on each step. So for long-range precision rifle shooting, a single-stage press will actually be very nice because it will cause you to slow down. You're not going to start to race yourself. So I actually still use this old guy for all my rifle precision reloading, okay? Another nice thing about the press like this is that in the smaller, lighter duty presses, you actually get to have a lot more of a feel when you're sizing and doing the different operations, because anything that's going on in there, you're going to be able to feel it quite easily. On some of the presses with more leverage, like the big heavy-duty RCBS, if you would run into a different amount of resistance while sizing, you might not notice it near as much because it's a lot smoother of a press. So that's one of the advantages to the cheap little guys. If someone asked me what kind of press to get, I would actually probably recommend one of the RCBS rock chuckers or one of those, but these work fine, and this is actually what I still use for a long time. But the really, really big ones with the massive amount of leverage might cause you to miss out on some of those things. And obviously, if you're reloading a cartridge where you'd experience a different amount of, resistance going in, you're going to want to set the cartridge to the side, because we're going to be trying to get maximum consistency. In order to get the best performance out of your cartridges when you're reloading, before priming, you're going to want to have some of these following tools. These are primer pocket cleaning tools. These two are made by Lee, and they're very inexpensive. They're just a couple dollars a piece. And you have a side that's for large primers and a side that's for small primers. And what you simply do is when you have your cartridge case and you have it deprimed, you're going to want to go into that primer flash, the primer pocket, and there's going to be crud in there sometimes. Well, there's always pretty much going to be crud in there. You're going to have some carbon cooked in there, and you're going to want to clean that out. And these little tools, basically, you stick this in that hole and you turn it around a couple times. And we'll show you how to do that after a little bit and some of the techniques that will be most effective. So you're going to definitely want primer pocket cleaners. Another thing you might need, especially if you're using some goofy cases that have some pocket inconsistencies as far as your primer pockets, you're going to maybe need a primer pocket uniforming tool. And that's what this thing here is. And what you have is a little cutter on the end, and it's going to be adjusted to where you bottom out this cutter in the primer pocket and give it a couple turns. And that'll remove any of the material that might be extra in there. It'll make sure everything's nice and square in the bottom of your primer pocket. That can also help a lot. If you're using premium rifle cases, this won't really be helpful because they're built to pretty good specs. But if you're using like a bunch of random stuff you find laying on the ground at the range or whatever, this will be very helpful. Another thing you might need, and I don't use this very much, but sometimes you have a flash hole that is kind of gnarled up or goofy, and this is a flash hole deburring tool. Basically, the handle on there, sometimes, we can look at a flash hole here, sometimes that hole in there has some brass or something's out of whack, or it's not perfectly round, or what have you, and you might need to remove some burrs. In that case, this tool becomes handy. Another thing to consider, you might not need this tool. If you actually run into a piece of brass, or you got a big piece of brass hanging into that flash hole, you might just want to set that piece of brass to the side, because that's an indicator something was goofy on that one. But that's the tools you're going to need to take care of your primer pockets. Another very important tool to have for cartridge loading is a case length gauge and shell holder. You're going to want to measure your case lengths. Once they start getting long, you start to have pressure issues due to various reasons, which we'll explain after a little while. But you're going to want one of these caliper type tools here, and you're going to want to measure the length of your cases to make sure they're not getting too long. And your reloading manual will have all that information in there, what your maximum case length is, and you don't ever want to let them get too long. If you do have a case that's too long, it's time to trim cases. And you're going to want to trim all of them, not just the long ones, because you want them to be at a consistent length. And that will require a tool like this. This is the cheapest way to go. This is pretty convenient way to go as well. It's pretty easy. This is the Lee case length gauge and shell holder. What we have is a cutting tool. We're going to stick this case length gauge. You buy this for whatever cartridge you're using. And here's an example of one in the box. It's like $1.99 is what I got mine for. They might be a little more if they're not on sale. But you buy it for your cartridge. You'll notice on this tool that we have the case length gauge. That's this part here. It's going to bottom out in the primer area. And that's what's going to kind of gauge off your length. And then you screw it into here. This is the cutter. that cutter is going to trim off the extra length off of your case, okay? And you're going to spin it around. And the way you're going to spin it around is you're going to hook this tool into the case. It's going to snap in that little spot there. You can hook it into a drill if you want, or you can just hold it and turn it. Either way is fine. This is a relatively nice tool. I should probably do a separate review on this. There are tabletop mounted versions as well that screw into the table. It's a totally different setup. They have electric ones. Anything you get will work fine as long as you use it properly. This is the cheapest way to go and probably the easiest way to go. The thing is, you have one length that it trims to. This screws into here and that's your length. It works fine if that's the length that you're happy with, and it usually works out to be a length that's significantly underneath your maximum length, which is good because you don't want to have to trim all the time if you don't have to. So after our cases have been prepped as far as your primer pockets, and you have confirmed that your length is good, we're going to need some case deburring tools. What happens is sometimes immediately after trimming, let's go over here, immediately after trimming these cases, what you'll find is you got sharp corners on the edge of the mouth or on the inside of the neck here, okay? And you don't want sharp corners. When you seat your bullet, that could shave off some of the jacket of the bullet and cause some little issues there. And it could also cause some issues smoothly chambering the round. So you're going to want to make sure that we have it kind of tapered off nicely. You're going to want to deburr this case mouth. The way to do that is to get one of these. The one on the left there, this little guy, that is made by Lee. And I've used that for a long time. That actually works pretty good. That's very, very cheap. It's just a couple dollars. However, if you're reloading some of the larger cases, like the 338s, like the 338 Lapua Magnum, like these guys here, doesn't quite fit over the shoulder. So before I can get it, down for there, it's bottomed out. So the inside part works fine, like this. They have two ends to them. The inside would be for doing the outside. You're going to turn it like so, and it'll shave it off. This side is going to be for the inside, and you would turn it like so, and that would deburr the case. There's a little cutter, a cutting edge on there. So if you have a 338 Lapua Magnum, this little guy is not going to work. The Lee, you're going to have to upgrade to the RCBS, and this one is really, really built nicely. This will last forever. And the same way, you have one end that trims this way, so you're going to just turn it, and you're going to want to give it just a couple turns, or you're going to want to use this side for the inside. Here's an example of a VLD taper one. If you notice the taper angle on these two different tools here, this one's a lot stubbier, this one's got a sleeker angle. This one is made for VLD shaped bullets, the longer, sleeker bullets. It'll give you more of a taper so that it's less likely to chafe off some of the jacket of the bullet when you're going in there. So that's kind of nice to have for the long range shooting guys. That's what I use actually for the insides of the case mouth there. This one I use for the outside. The next tool you're going to need is an auto priming tool or a hand priming tool. And what this does is this will put primers in your cases. There's two different kinds, or there's a lot of different kinds you can get. These are the popular ones. This is the RCBS, which will be necessary if you're using the 338 Lapua Magnum. The other one that you can get is a bit cheaper. It's the Lee Auto Prime tool. This was like only $18, and I got a lot of miles on this. This works just fine. However, it's not quite large enough to accommodate the 338 case, even though they do sell the shell holders for that cartridge. It does not fit in there. I tried to even mill it down, and it still didn't fit. So if you're going to be reloading the 338 Lapua, or some of the really fat cases like that, you're going to have to use the RCBS. So hopefully you can save a few bucks there rather than having to buy something different. That other one works on everything else that I own. But this is actually a nice tool. It will require an RCBS standard shell holder. So if you're using this, I would get an extra RCBS shell holder just like using your press. If you're using the Lee tool, you're going to have to get a Lee shell holder. And they're not too expensive. It's like $3 for one of those. So that's just for the auto priming tool. How that works is you put your primers in the tray, you make sure everything's lined, you put it together correctly, you slide the case in there on the shell holder, and you squeeze that handle and it'll prime. And we'll show you the things to watch out for in a coming video on that shortly. The next thing we're going to need in a reloading setup is a powder measure and some kind of scale setup, and probably a powder trickler. If we want to load propellant, we're going to have to be very precise with what's going on. You don't want to just use a volumetric system of measurement. You're going to want to go by weight most likely. So this is your powder measure. You're going to add the propellant in here, and you're going to flip this lever down. It's going to fill up this tube with the proper volume, okay? And then you flip it back up, and it's going to come through the spout. And what a lot of guys do is they hold the cartridge up down here, and it fills in your case with the proper volume of propellant. And that actually works pretty good. But for our purposes, I would recommend weighing your powder charges just to ensure that you have exactly the right amount. Sometimes when you flip these down and flip them up, stuff gets stuck in here. If you got a little bit of moist air conditions, you could have powder stick in here, and you might get light charges sometimes. Or you might adjust a charge different, or possibly you're going to have it lay in there different each time you fill it up. The grains are going to orient themselves in a different fashion each time. So you're going to want to confirm your powder charge for each load. I would strongly recommend doing that. In order to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to get this adjusted just a couple hairs light, and then you're going to want to dump it into the tray, a little tray like so. And we're going to need a scale. Now, any of these hand scales that you have are actually going to work very, very well. They do have digital scales. They definitely are incorporating a lot more technology into the modern digital scales. I have a lot of friends that use those. You actually get the same degree of precision with the old style scales like this here. And if you look at it, you have it arranged in 5 grain increments on that bar. Over here we have 10th grain increments down on the end. And over here we can see that we have 100th grain increments. So you can actually get very, very precise. And if you have a good eye, you can even get less than 100th grain increments in between there. You can tell if it's halfway in between the marks, or a quarter of the way, or a tenth of the way, depending on how good your eye is. So you can actually have a greater degree of precision on some of these older scales like this. This is an old Redding. I got it for like 10 bucks at a gun show. These are generally speaking a lot less expensive than the electronic ones, and they do work very, very well. You need to make sure you have it set up correctly. When you go, that's all you need to do. It does take a little more time. The electric ones are more convenient, but this for precision rifle loading actually works quite well. Any scale you get, you're just going to want to make sure you verify your charge. So you're going to pour the powder charge into here, weigh it, confirm. Now what you're going to do a lot of times is it's not going to be perfect, and it's going to be off a little bit. So I set my powder measure a little bit light on the charge, just the hair light, and then I fill it up into the scale, and then I watch my bar here, and what I do is I take this powder trickler. This is going to be a very, very, very handy friend of yours. And you fill this up with propellant as well, and when you turn this little knob here, this hole spins around. There's threads on the inside, and that makes little granules of powder work their way down this tube. And so you orient it like this, and then you basically turn this deal, and it's going to trickle powder grain by grain into this. When I say grain, I mean granules, not the unit of weight. And it'll drop them in there, and you'll keep an eye on this until it's perfectly zeroed. And that's a very, very handy way to do it. So I always set it light, and then I just trickle the last couple in there just to make sure it's good. Once it's in there, you're going to want to get your little powder funnel. And it's important that you have a powder funnel made for powder. You don't want to just use a normal funnel you can buy at the hardware store. You want something static free, because when you dump that powder in there, you don't want anything to stick to these sides. So these are pretty inexpensive too, but make sure you get one designed for cartridge reloading. The chemistry on these polymers and plastics are different for different applications. You don't want to use like an oil funnel or something like that. Another piece of equipment that's going to help you out is a tumbler, and this basically uses a media, and you can buy a big jug of media here. There's different kinds. With this powder, these are ground up walnut shells sometimes, or sometimes a corn cob media that are treated with chemicals. I like to use the walnut shells. They seem to work pretty good. And you dump your dirty cartridge cases in there. They'll wiggle around in there for a while. You hit the button, and a motor wiggles that around, and it cleans up your cases. You want to take great care when you're done, when you dig the cases out of there, to make sure it's all out before you charge it with powder. Because if you don't, that's not going to be very good. So you're going to want to hold this up to the edge and make sure you get all your powder trickled out of there. We'll show you some techniques after a while. And this is a very handy item to have as well. And of course you're going to want media. If you're using a giant cartridge case like a 50, some of these sizes are not going to be appropriate. You're going to have to get an extra large one. This is like a medium size one. I forget, what is this? The Tumbler 600. And a lot of different brands put these out as well. Another tool you might want to have is a hand case neck turner. This one's made by RCBS. And basically that will be for uniforming your case necks. Sometimes the thickness on these cases will vary as you go around. And that can cause some problems with accuracy as well. So if you have, especially if you got a lot of rounds through some of your cases, or if you're using some of the cheaper cases, it might be important, or lots of different kinds of cases as well. It might be important to make sure that the thickness around the entire mouth of the case, the neck here, is uniform. And what that tool does is you basically insert the case into here, and there'll be a cutting tool, and you turn it, and it will, like a miniature lathe, it'll kind of cut it down to a uniform size. You're also going to definitely need some case lube. Now, before you do your resizing on these cartridge cases, you're going to have to make sure they're lubricated. Otherwise, you could get them stuck in here forever. You get a cartridge case that's dry, rammed up in this press, and you might have to dig that sucker out of there. You might damage the die. You just want to make sure you have it lubed. That's a must, a 100% have to have kind of deal. I like to use the Hornady One Shot. It's a spray-on type lube. They do have lubes that come in an ink tray looking deal where you roll them around on kind of a pad, and then you would have to apply with a brush on the inside of the case neck with the lube. And what you do is you basically hold this can, you know, kind of like a spray can, at a certain distance away, at a 45-degree angle. You're going to want to spray down and coat all these cases, okay? And you're going to want to do that from all 4 angles. That's what I would recommend. You're going to want to make sure you have plenty of lube on the inside and on the outside as well. And we'll show you what that would look like in our reloading video, actually, where we're going to show you a full reloading process here. Another note is that there's different brands of lube, and they do have different lubricities. This is convenient. I like to use it for all my cartridges. However, if I was reloading something extremely long, or something long and fragile that's has a propensity to get crinkled, like a 45-120 Sharps or something like that, a lot of these guys do the 50 BMGs, right? You're going to want to use Imperial Lube, and I don't have a can here, but it's a different kind of lube, and you apply it on there. It's a lot thicker, and it's a little tricky because you got to evenly coat it, and we'll show you how to go over that in a minute. But you're definitely going to want to use that on something that's heavy duty, if you run into a lot of resistance while sizing, and it seems like something's going to snap in half and kill you just from resizing, which can happen like with the BMG round. Imperial Lube is the one I would recommend. You can also use a graphite-based lube, and this is an Imperial Dry Neck Lube, and that's basically a graphite powder inside there. Let's see if I can open this up without making a mess with one hand. There you go, just got some graphite powder in there. It does get a little bit messy, but that works pretty good as well. You can apply this to your necks. This is basically made for case necks. So if you're just neck sizing and that's it, that might work pretty well for you. It didn't seem to work quite well enough in my Lapua Magnum, so I actually switched over to the one-shot lube. But a lot of guys do use a dry neck lube is available as well. In addition to your empty cartridge cases, you're obviously going to want new bullets, projectiles, right? And I buy them in massive bulk so that I don't have to worry about different lot numbers being different from each other. And you're going to need propellant. And based on what your reloading manual tells you, or whatever load dynamics you want to have in your cartridge, the powder type is going to obviously vary. This is what I use for 243 with the 105 grain AMAXs. I actually like to use Ramshot Magnum. I don't know if you've ever seen this stuff before. But this is what I use in my Lapua Magnum. This is made, I think, in Montana. And it's usually, it has a pretty good price on it, especially up here where it's kind of close by. There's a lot of different powders. There's huge amount of different variety of powders, actually. And that's kind of one of those deals that you just kind of got to experiment with or get someone's opinion on for different loads. It totally depends on what kind of load you're trying to accomplish and what cartridge you're using, what kind of bullets you're using. For cartridge reloading, one of the most important things to have is an area to do it that is relatively secure. You don't want little kids or animals or your wife getting into your reloading equipment setup, because it's kind of like a laboratory, and it could be potentially dangerous to have propellants and primers and stuff lying around in here. And you don't want anyone touching any of your equipment once you get it set up and adjusted. So I would recommend having a special little area designated as your reloading area. Keep it secure, locked up if you have little kids, and you're going to also want some kind of bench or desk. You don't want something super flimsy. This looks pretty light duty, but it's actually kind of built pretty solid. This is just a old school desk, I think. But you can reinforce an old table if you need to, but you're going to be mounting your equipment on here, like you got your press, you're going to mount your powder measure on there, and other tools. So you're going to need a little bit of counter space. You don't need a whole lot. This is an example of a small amount of counter space. But you're definitely going to want a designated area that's secure and also a relatively stable bench. And of course, last but not least, you're going to want some sort of reloading manual book. You can get your load data off the computer, but it's nice to have this all in book form, because sometimes the computer might not work, obviously. And this one, I actually like. This is the Hornady manual. And they have another edition too. I think it's the second part of this book. It's all on ballistics, and that's an extremely good read as well. Not only does this have all your load data for different rifle cartridges and pistol cartridges for Hornady bullets, but it also has a really good section here going through the basics of reloading, accuracy, like cartridge dynamics, lots of good illustrations, and this will get you up to speed. If you read through the whole first part of this book, you'll be completely up to speed with most reloading guys. This will give you all your definitions. It'll tell you about things like resizing problems and things you might run into, case reforming, all the details. There's really no reason for me to go over all these different things because they're already covered so well in various sources such as reloading manuals like this. You can also get loading manuals for other brands, obviously, like Sierra has a loading manual. Spear bullets, whatever kind of bullet you plan on using, might be wise to have one for there. But the Hornady, I really like that as far as the other information. When you're selecting a load, another thing you're going to want to consider, and we'll talk about this in more detail when we actually go through and load a couple cartridges here, is they have comments on each of these different cartridges here. You'll see if you read through it, it'll give you some pointers as to some of the experience they've had with different powders. And we talked briefly on how different harmonic signatures can be developed based on barrel length and things like that with the different pressure curves in various loads. And they'll give you their test barrel usually that they use, and they'll give you the conditions they loaded for, and they'll give you a good basic starting point for accuracy loads a lot of times. And that can be quite helpful as well. You'll see they'll have these loading manuals set up by bullet types. And then they'll have the different powders available and your different velocities that you can attain with the different powder charges. Now, one thing I should reiterate here, and I'll say this again probably a few times, is that when it comes to cartridge reloading, you want to be very careful to stick to this book like it was the Bible or something like that. You don't really want to deviate from what the book tells you. Although you can get away in a lot of cases with a heavier load than the literature might suggest. For our purposes, it's not highly advantageous to do so because a lot of guys figure if you can get a little more speed out of a cartridge, that's going to help you out at long range. And that will for most guys who aren't familiar with how to correctly adjust for all these things and develop a firing solution. However, we're going to go through and we're going to be precisely adjusting for our drop and all our other environmental conditions. So having an extremely hot load is not going to be that helpful for us. So you're going to want to find a load that gives you the best precision capability, the best accuracy. yeah, a lot of my loads that I use for extreme range shooting, even for my 338, are quite mild loads and are nowhere close to a maximum load. Because it's not a problem for me. I just simply adjust exactly for my drop. A flat trajectory can be helpful. It'll be a little more forgiving, but if you're precisely adjusting for it, that's not 100% necessary. So that's one thing to consider when you're going through these. Don't always start off on a max load. Another thing with another drawback to doing that, obviously, is you're going to have a lot more wear. And it depends. It can vary from your chamber dimensions, what kind of cartridge exactly you're shooting, how everything's set up in your rifle. But generally speaking, you're going to wear out your rifle faster if you have excessive pressure. You can even damage things. And the likelihood of damage is increased if something does get screwed up, if you're already at maximum pressure. So just because some guys are very familiar with the different signs of pressure and they can keep a pretty good eye on that and get away with a little more power, I would not recommend that. It's not going to be that helpful for us anyways. So make sure you get yourself a good loading manual. This is one of my favorites. There's lots of different ones, but this is an excellent resource and is something you should probably familiarize yourself with, at least all the terms. They have a glossary in the back, I believe, where it talks about all your different, different terms or whatever. So, and that'll be very helpful. All right. Our next video is going to be on some more in-depth on the different individual stages in reloading. And I'll go through and just give you some brief tips on things to watch out for. And it'll be more of a supplementary kind of a guide to reloading. I'm not going to go through every little detail. That's what things like this book are good for. I don't want to be too... I don't want to offer you a bunch of information that you can easily read a lot of other places. So I'm just going to supplement with a lot of my tips. And I will go through some of the basics. But the direction we're taking is more in detail for long-range precision reloading. And some of the tips that will help you get extremely consistent cartridges so that we can minimize our muzzle velocity variation due to different cartridge inconsistencies, and also minimize our harmonic deflections at the end of the muzzle, like we discussed earlier. So that's the direction we're headed. So stay tuned, and I'm just going to go through and reload. I got a little bit of reloading to do, so we'll start that, and you guys can just hang out with me while I do that, and we'll visit about it as we go. $890. Confirm.
Green light.
Hit.
Oh, you got it! Holy cow, you got it!